let's talk about wide receivers that you should start or sit in week 9 of the fantasy football season. Now, there are 4 teams on bye that, you're going to be without some of your guys. Garrett Wilson, who knows if he would have played with injury anyway, but A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Emeka Egbuka, these guys that you're, in your lineup every week, you're not going to have them. Don't worry, I'm going to go through every single matchup. There are time codes as well if you want to skip to a specific matchup. They're also in the description. So let's go ahead and rank every single wide receiver throughout this video. All right, Thursday Night Football. We've got the Ravens at the Dolphins. 49.5 point over under. So a very high over under in this game. And the Ravens are heavy favorites. 7.5 point spread in their favor, obviously. Now, to anybody who owns Zay Flowers, rejoice. The time is now to rejoice because we should see Lamar Jackson back in this game. Harbaugh says, I feel very confident about it. I expect him to be out there Thursday. And then the practice reports, which they got in trouble with last week. They can't fake these anymore or be cheeky, right? But the practice report, most recent one, he was a full participant. That is fantastic news for Zay Flowers. He should be out there ready to go against this Dolphins defense. I will say this does have the ingredients for a potential letdown for Zay Flowers. If you think about this type of game, Ravens are heavy favorites. You can attack the Dolphins on the ground very easily. Lamar Jackson back, Derrick Henry doing his thing. There's potential for bust, a bust game for Zay Flowers, but regardless, because of the upside he carries week in, week out, I am going to label him a must start. But keep in mind, there's a chance that this game doesn't look good for Zay Flowers. On the opposite side of the ball, Jalen Waddle's really become a must start regardless of the game that he's in, but this is a good matchup. Ravens are the 4th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. A healthy Lamar Jackson only helps the wide receivers who are facing the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So should be a competitive game. A lot of points expected according to Vegas. Waddle's a must start. Okay, let's go to the start of the Sunday games. We've got the Bears at the Bengals. 51.5 point over under, which by the way is tied for the second highest over under of the week. Finally on Sunday, one of our buy lows this week, Rome Odunze, we saw him get right back on track. I know his first target read was a really big talking point after the bye week, but he comes out here, has 10 targets, leads the team, clearly the number 1 weapon, ends up with 18.4 fantasy points, 7 catches, 114 yards. Did that against a really bad Baltimore Ravens defense. Now he gets to face the Bengals, another defense that nobody's writing home about, right? So he's an absolute must start for me in a high over under. DJ Moore is a spot start. Again, like if you start DJ Moore, your expectations should be 8 to 12 fantasy points. That's really what you should expect from him. There's not a very high ceiling. Now on the opposite side, the Bengals. Of course, you're going to start Jamar Chase. As long as Joe Flacco is out there, he's going to continue to be a superstar. Joe Flacco is day-to-day with a shoulder injury. I would expect him to play. Obviously, if he doesn't, then you really need to lower your expectations for all these wide receivers. But my rankings are there as if he's playing because with Joe Flacco out there, Jamar Chase it's like an auto lock. All right. It's like just Joe Flacco's not human. He's actually AI, the most advanced AI you've ever seen. And the AI, the person behind the AI's computer said, at every possible opportunity that you can target Jamar Chase, do it. That's the code that he's currently running on. Since week 6, Jamar Chase has 54 targets. You want to know who's next? Ladd McConkey in that span, 34. Absolute must start. My wide receiver 1. T. Higgins, my wide receiver 25. He's a flexible name. Without that touchdown last week, I win my matchup. And without that touchdown last week, T. Higgins puts up a goose egg. So the reality is, T. Higgins is going to have some bad games here and there, but with the upside of a Joe Flacco and such an exciting game here, 51.5 point over under, you can start him. Let's go to the Vikings at the Lions next. 47.5 point over under. The Lions are heavy favorites in this matchup. Let's start with the Lions, by the way. 8.5 point favorites. The reality is, it doesn't matter what the game script is. Amon-Ra St. Brown is safe. Doesn't matter if they're up and they're heavy favorites or if they're down and doesn't look good for the team. He's going to get targets. He's going to get his. What we know for sure is that Jameson is the definition of boom bust. The problem is the boom hasn't even been there. He hasn't scored over 20 points any game this entire season. Even in games where they're slightly competitive, you can't guarantee that Jameson Williams is going to get a touchdown or going to get his opportunities. Last time out, Jameson Williams was barely even targeted. So, I mean, he's a Hail Mary play at best. There's really not that much different between a Rashid Shaheed and a Jameson Williams. And I would love to be wrong. I mean, I've got his jersey right over there in my closet. But at this point, they're just not using him. They don't need him. He is so impactful for their team and so not impactful for fantasy football. The way that he spreads the field out, leaves things open underneath, it is invaluable to the Detroit Lions. But unfortunately, it has little to no value on a weekly basis for fantasy football. So do that with what you may, whatever the saying is. Now, for the Vikings, this is a great matchup against the Detroit Lions, whose defense is getting healthier, but still has some injuries in their secondary. Justin Jefferson, my wide receiver 7. Jordan Addison, my wide receiver 24. Both are must starts this week. Now, Carson Wentz, he's not going to play again this year. Okay? So the big question for everybody who owns these Vikings wide receivers, you're probably wondering, you want to hear my thoughts on this, is can J.J. McCarthy support both of these names? My answer is, I have no idea. I know that's not what you want to hear, but let's talk it out. Because J.J. McCarthy has not played this year with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson both in that lineup. We haven't seen that just yet because Addison was suspended before, J.J. went down with that injury. So we're going to see McCarthy for the first time. Here's what I will say. I am willing to start both of these guys because the matchup tells us, and this game isn't played on paper, but the matchup tells us it should be a very good day for Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Why? Well, it's a high over-under. The Lions are favored by 8.5 points. So the game script we're thinking of is the Lions are up, they're controlling the clock, and J.J. McCarthy, Jefferson, and Addison are trying to come back from behind, storm. There could be plenty of points in the fourth quarter. In fact, I would expect the most points for both of these wide receivers to come in the third and fourth quarter when they're down and trying to get back into the game. So both are startable guys. Kevin O'Connell, I trust him enough. Okay, let's go to the Panthers at the Packers. 44.5 point over under. The Packers are favored by 12.5 points. 12.5 point favorites. That's the second largest spread of the week in favor of Green Bay. And I'll be honest with you guys, Tetairoa McMillan is really the only guy in this matchup that I think you can start with a lot of confidence. There are other names that you can put in there, but here's the problem with the Packers. The Panthers are really difficult for your wide receivers in fantasy football. It's a 5th worst matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. It's not a good matchup in general. Typically, teams are not down against the Panthers, so typically they're not needing to throw the ball much in the second half. Now, here's what's even more difficult, because just a couple weeks ago, you didn't have to compete with Jayden Reed, Christian Watson. Now Christian Watson is back on this team. He's an important part of the passing attack. Tucker Kraft is doing his thing. Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden. There's just so many names on a weekly basis. There is not a safe floor for these guys. If you have to start one of them, it's Romeo Doubs. But any week, Matthew Golden can break out, and there could be a Golden game. It could be a Watson game. Doubs could be irrelevant. These guys are going to be Russian roulette. It's disgusting. I don't really want to be a part of it if you can find another name. But again, Romeo Doubs is a flex option at best. On the opposite side of the ball, I would personally like to see Andy Dalton get another start. Regardless, Bryce Young has still given Tetairoa McMillan a really safe floor, so I don't really care which guy it is. We're going to name T-Mac a must start, who had, I think it was 100 yards last week with Andy Dalton. He is the only guy you can start with any sort of confidence. Okay, let's go to the Broncos at the Texans. This is the lowest over-under of the week. Makes sense, right? Two really good defenses. And the Texans are favored by 1.5 points. So, last week without Nico Collins, we finally saw some of these rookie wide receivers, specifically my guy, Jaden Higgins, get heavily involved. Jaden Higgins led the way in snaps, routes run, and in targets. Finally, they completely unleashed him. He got into the end zone, 4 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown. Now, Xavier Hutchinson was involved. Jalen Noel was involved. Now, here's the problem. If, and I would anticipate this is going to happen, if Nico Collins is back this week from the concussion, and it's very rare that wide receivers miss more than one game with a concussion, I expect him to be back, then that completely nukes all the value of a Noel, of a Higgins. Nico Collins is the only guy that you could start there with any sort of confidence, okay? It really messes stuff up for these young rookies. Now, I'm more confident in Nico this week because there will be no Patrick Surtain. He is probably going to go on the IR with that pectoral injury. So you don't have to deal with one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. That's why I have more confidence in Nico Collins. Also, he'll be at home. That's great news. These are two defenses that do not let the other guys throw the ball very much. But look, in this scenario where if Nico Collins and Christian Kirk are out, then I do think Jaden Higgins is the one that I would prefer to start, and Jalen Noel becomes a risky Hail Mary play at best. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, coming off a really disappointing game for Courtland Sutton, it was all Troy Franklin last week. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not really excited to start any Broncos wide receiver in this game. That Texas defense, they're legit. They are a tough defense, not only to run on, but to throw on as well. I've got Courtland Sutton as a high-end wide receiver 3 in that flexible range. You can play him, but there could be a very disappointing game ahead for you. And I would really suggest for you guys not to chase that Troy Franklin game. Against the Dallas Cowboys, you anticipate your wide receiver 2s and 3s having really big blow-up games. You don't anticipate that against the Texans, who are the most difficult matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. So I think Troy Franklin goes right back into that box. I wouldn't start him personally, but again, they don't play the game on paper, do they? Just before we get into this next matchup, I want to tell you guys about a completely free feature that you should be taking advantage of. Now, if you go to the Flock Fantasy site and you create a free account with the promo code LAND, you can gain access to what we call the My Teams feature. That allows you to see all of the expert consensus on your league, where you stand, rankings, league rankings. It'll help you look at recent trades and help you actually design trades yourself. So check that out in the description if you want to have some fun with the free feature on the Flock site. Let's go to the Falcons at the Patriots. 45.5 point over under. The Pats are favored by 5.5 points. Drake London is considered day-to-day, as well as Michael Penix. They're dealing with different injuries. London has the hip injury. Michael Penix has the knee injury. Look, if Drake London's out there, he's not getting sat. That's just common sense. You're not going to sit Drake London if he's available. And if anything, looking at how dysfunctional that Falcons offense was last week without Drake London, yeah, I know it was not Penix, it was Kirk Cousins, but without Drake London, they looked completely hopeless. That's got to be a really comforting sign for the London owners out there. It's a great matchup, by the way. The Patriots are a top 5 matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. So London's out there. Mooney's a Hail Mary play at best. At best, a Hail Mary play. However, London is worse on the road than he is at home. Those splits are pretty tough. So, but I still would put him out there. On the opposite side of the ball, Stephon Diggs owners, you got to be so glad that he got into the end zone, because it looked like another bust game for him. Look, he's a spot start between him and Booty and Demario Douglas. It's kind of a Russian roulette scenario. Again, it's not that different than the Green Bay Packers. Of course, you prefer Dobbs right now in Green Bay. You prefer Diggs right now in New England. But each and every week, there are plenty of opportunities for these guys to disappoint you. It's not a great matchup either. The Pats are favorites. There's a lot of signs to point towards maybe these Patriot wide receivers don't pan out, at least on paper. But of course, anything can happen in the game. The Pats are favored. Not a great sign for needing to throw the ball, right? The Falcons are the 3rd worst matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. We've seen Drake May, spread the ball around. So I think there's going to be some potentially difficult matchups here for these Pats receivers. Let's go to 49ers at Giants. 48.5 point over under. The Giants are underdogs, even though they're at home. Let's talk about the Giants. I know it was a disappointing game last week for Wan'Dale Robinson. No doubt about it. I mean, they were down for the entirety of this game. Now, here's the good news. Still led the team in snaps as well as routes run. He only had 4 targets. The Eagles they had a game plan to shut him down, and it was very successful. But that does not take Wan'Dale Robinson out of starting contention. In fact, with the Cam Skadabu injury, I would argue that Wan'Dale Robinson might actually have gained value rest of season. He's my wide receiver 32, so he's a flexible option this week, depending on what you have available. I mean, we just saw the Texans wide receivers go off against the Niners, so it is possible. Darius Slayton, much more of a DFS Hail Mary play, but he did have a touchdown called back due to OPI last week. Now, with the 49ers, it's a great matchup. The Giants are the 9th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver, but quite frankly, I have no idea who the hell to tell you to start in this wide receiver room. It's a new fad every week, right? These 49er wide receivers are basically the latest TikTok trend. They don't last long. It's about 1 or 2 weeks you can rely on it. Then there's another new trend that you got to figure out what the hell's going on. There's no consistency. No consistency whatsoever. Like 2 weeks ago, people would laugh at you for starting Juwan Jennings. They would say, Kendrick Bourne is a guy you got to play. And the last 2 weeks, Kendrick Bourne is busted. We don't know, by the way, if Brock Purdy's going to be out there or not. I'm not sure it would really change much of my rankings regardless. Ricky Pearsall, we don't know if he's going to be out there or not. Brandon Ayuk will not be out there this week. That's at least the good news. But honestly, even if Ricky Pearsall is out, both Jennings and Bourne are just, they're desperation plays at best, right? If your lineup is relying on a 49ers wide receiver right now, then you're probably not making the playoffs. Let's be so for real. Juwan Jennings last week, 7 targets, led the way, but what was it worth? 8.5 fantasy points. Does it really matter? Does it really matter where the targets go in San Francisco right now? Against the Giants, it probably will. One of these games, guys is going to have a good game. I don't think you really know who. So look, if Ricky Pearsall is active, they all become risky starts. If Ricky Pearsall is not active, I'd probably throw my money at Juwan Jennings, but you could be throwing your money away. That's the real take for that wide receiver room right now. Let's go to the Colts at the Steelers. 49.5 point over under, so a very high over under. The Colts are favored by 3 points. Michael Pittman, man, what an absolute steal he has been in fantasy football so far. He has been just so dominant. He's the wide receiver 6 through 8 weeks. What an absolute steal in your fantasy football drafts. I mean, he has a touchdown in 6 out of 8 games. Of course, there's always a potential for him to bust, but there's not a chance you can sit him in this matchup. High over under, close spread. The Steelers are the second best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver, and he's on a tear. You got to put him into your lineup. As far as Pearson Downs, it's just too risky each and every week. They don't have, a very safe floor, so I would be very cautious. And on the opposite side of the ball, it's another matchup where DK Metcalf should smash, right? Colts are a great matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. The third best matchup, in fact. So I'm going to be putting DK Metcalf into my lineups if I've got him for sure. Okay, let's go to the Chargers at the Titans. 42.5 point over under. The Chargers are 10.5 point favorites. Lad McConkey, a must start. Keenan Allen, a must start. Those guys have been getting the consistent target share. As far as Quentin Johnston goes, I'm a little bit concerned about him, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, we can go back to Thursday Night Football last week and we can say, well, look, I mean, Johnston didn't have a single target. I mean, he's going to have targets in this game. He's going to. But the issue is, when you look at this tight end, Oronde Gadsden, he really is kind of starting to take over that Johnston role. The problem is the offensive line cannot hold up long enough for big plays to happen, and that's where Johnston's money really is. So Gadsden's more of an intermediate option who has that big play threat. I would label Johnson a spot start at best. It's difficult to really rely on him week in, week out. Now, for the Titans, I don't think it's too early to say this, but I think DK is the guy to start here in the Tennessee Titans wide receiver room. I really do. I mean, it's back-to-back weeks where he has over 16 fantasy points, and this week, he tied Alec Manor with targets for 8. In fact, all 3 of those wide receivers had 8 targets, but with DK coming out of the slot, it's just a much more easy layup for Cam Ward than trying to find Alec Manor or Van Jefferson deep down the field. Those layup opportunities are really helping not only Cam Ward, but DK. A game where he had 7 catches, 93 yards. I think he's a decent spot start this week in a game where I anticipate the Titans being down. So I think you can play him if you're going to play any of those names. Okay, let's go to the Saints at the Rams. This is the start of the afternoon slate of games. It's the largest spread of the week in favor of the Rams. So Vegas does anticipate the Rams winning this easily. And anybody who's ever watched a Saints game this year, you probably understand why. I mean, I would anticipate the same thing. Where are my Puka Nacua people at? Where are my Puka Nacua people at? Give yourself a pat on the back if you were patient and you waited on him. He is back and ready to go, and he should be locked and loaded into your lineups. Devontae Adams, also a must start. Anytime these guys are out there playing in any game, they're going to be in your lineups. On the opposite side of the ball, Chris Olave continues to be one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football this year. This last week, they were down the entire game. He ends up with 12 targets, turns those 12 targets into 14 fantasy points. That's what we love to see. Great news for him. So we're going to continue to play Chris Olave each and every single week. Okay, Jags at the Raiders. Now, there was a lot of talk about a potential Brian Thomas trade last week. Head coach Cohen came out and basically said, hey, we hear the speculation. It's not from us. We have no plans to trade Brian Thomas. It's not in our plans at all. So as long as he is healthy, then I'm going to play Brian Thomas with confidence. However, if he's not healthy, I would prefer Travis Hunter. So we'll have to kind of monitor the practice reports this entire week. But Travis Hunter, a real flexible option this week. He truly is. I mean, they showed before the bye that they want to feature him as a wide receiver. That is great signs if you were patient with Travis Hunter. You can put him into your lineups against the Raiders, who are a great matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. Okay, on the opposite side of the ball, I don't see a clear start. I really don't. Geno Smith has not been competent enough. The offensive line is not held up. The defense can't stop anyone. I mean, this Las Vegas Raiders, they might be the most pitiful team in the NFL right now. They truly might. Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker. I mean, you're betting on one of these guys to get a touchdown, but it's probably not going to happen. This defense is actually pretty good in Jacksonville. So if you can sit them, I probably would lean that way. Okay, let's go to the Chiefs at the Bills. Tied for the second highest over-under of the week, 51.5 points. The Chiefs are favored in Buffalo, which I thought was crazy, but it's true. Rashee Rice, how good has he been, man? I mean, if you waited on Rashee Rice and, congratulations. What an absolute superstar. We loved him in this offseason and Dynasty, encouraged everyone to buy him, and he is the engine that runs that Chiefs offense. Now, Xavier Worthy had a fine game last week. Here's the good news about Xavier Worthy, okay? Unfortunately, I lost my matchup because I just needed one more catch from him, but here's the good news. Xavier Worthy is giving you a safe floor. I mean, you could say Worthy and Jameson Williams are the same thing, but the difference is Xavier Worthy actually gives you a really safe floor week in, week out. And of course, we know he has the potential to really boom for fantasy football. This is a matchup where you would anticipate the Chiefs really needing to throw the ball for the vast majority of the game. It's in Buffalo. The Bills are the 10th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. High over under, close spread. If any game we're going to see Xavier Worthy go out there and have a good day in fantasy, it's got to be this week, in my opinion, because he's actually going to be needed. That's really the difference, right? As for the Bills, it's only Shakir, and that's it. You don't really consider anybody else. It's a bad matchup, but again, when you have two elite offenses against two defenses, you can still start those elite offenses. Okay, Sunday Night Football, Seahawks at Commanders. The Seahawks are favored, even though it's in Washington, and honestly, I understand why. For the Seahawks, it's very simple. You start Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's been one of the best players in fantasy football this year. It's not even close. You don't overthink it, especially against this Commanders defense. He should have another great day. On the opposite side, things get a little more tricky because while we did get Terry McLaurin back last week and he did score the touchdown on Monday Night Football, he also re-aggravated that quad injury that cost him all those games earlier in the year. So I don't know information at the time of recording this, but if I was a betting man, I would say he might miss time. He probably misses time. Now, I'm ranking these guys as if both of them are out there. You can attack the Seahawks through the air. It's tough to attack them on the ground. So if you have these guys, I think they are must plays this week in a game where the Commanders should be down. But if Jaden Daniels is out, because right now we're ranking this as if Terry is healthy, Jaden Daniels is healthy. If Jaden Daniels is out, they both become spot starts rather than must starts, so more flexible names. And if Daniels and McLaurin are out, then I would start Deebo Samuel no matter what. All right, he will be the featured wide receiver. Just before Monday Night Football, I got to tell y'all, I'm on an absolute heater right now in my DFS game. I just won last week's Quick Six Super Slam contest. We've got number one place here. We had Barkley, Taylor, Cook. Those guys at the top of our lineups just dominated, which means we won $500. Now, here is my lineup for this week. We're rocking with Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, welcome back Pookie, Kyron Williams, DeAndre Swift against the Bengals, Metcalf against the Colts, and Etienne against the Raiders. You can create your own lineup. It's simple. All you got to do is download the FastDraft app, use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you can create your own lineup, whatever you want it to be, right? So check that out in the description if you want to have some fun on FastDraft's Quick Six Super Slam contest. I'd love for you to come compete against me, all right? All right, I need some more competition over there. Okay, last game of the week, Monday Night Football. We've got the Cardinals at the Cowboys. Highest over-under of the week. They saved it for last. 53.5 points. Cowboys are favored by 3 points. This should be a great, great game. Now, Marvin Harrison, I get why he's difficult to trust, but if any week this entire year you're going to go out there and play him with any confidence, it's this week against the Dallas Cowboys, who are the best matchup in fantasy football. Cardinals should be needing to throw the ball in this game. Marvin should, keyword is should, have a fine return for you in fantasy football this week. Now, On the opposite side of that, CeeDee Lamb, of course you're going to play him. George Pickens, of course you're going to play him. You just don't really sit these wide receivers on a superstar elite offense, right? It would make no sense for me to come out here and say, oh, well, maybe you should sit these guys. No, you play them each and every week with confidence, regardless of the matchup. Guys, I appreciate you so much watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you found anything valuable in today's video, as well as subscribe, same thing. We've already got the running back version of this video out on the channel, so you can go watch that now if you like. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.